stand for freedom, though freedom is never really free. We yearn and strive for brotherhood, protecting our liberty.
Good evening and welcome to Your Right to Know by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. My name is Mary Lotze and I will be your host for this evening's show. This is going to be a fun show tonight, and just to sort of set for our viewers when we're doing this show, today is the day of the first presidential debate that'll happen later this evening. So I have a panel of Republicans and Trump supporters with me tonight, and we're going to be talking about former President Donald Trump and introducing him to our viewers for a second time and letting you know that we're Trump supporters, proud Trump supporters, and we don't fear President Trump as being president again. So I'd like to start by introducing our panel. And Lorraine, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Lorraine Rudd from Lunenburg. I am the Worcester Middlesex Senate District Captain for the Trump campaign.
Ken?
My name is Ken Wood. I'm from Shirley, and presently I am the chairman of the Republican Town Committee.
I'm John Strang. I'm the chairman of the Fitchburg Republican City Committee.
I'm Mary Gagnon. I'm from Ashburnham, and I'm the town captain for Trump.
Dave Lunger. I am chairman of the Acton Republican Town Committee, and I'm also a state committee man from the Middlesex Worcester District in the Mass GOP.
Thank you so much, all of you. So what you see now is we have kind of a diverse group of people from areas, cities and towns in our local area, and they all have maybe some different perspectives on former President Trump that we'd like to talk about. Dave, I'm going to start with you. What has been your Trump journey? We've known Trump since probably late in 2015 when he first came down that golden elevator in Trump Tower.
Well, I've heard of Trump way before that because I'm a New Yorker.
Oh.
And I followed, I didn't follow very closely, but I know that he was, all these, he was a real estate developer, and he went bankrupt many times and that kind of thing. But
Part of the deal.
2015, I was a Cruz supporter initially. And what brought me into Trump was realizing it's not about Cruz, and it's not even about Trump, it's about MAGA. Mm-hmm. And I'm a conservative first. My primary thing is to be a conservative. So Trump represents the conservative view and bringing back the republic. So
Mary,
that's where I am.
what about you?
Again, 2015, when he came down the elevator, I was a registered Republican. So I was drawn to him because he was a businessman, and I thought the country needed a businessman instead of a career politician. And then, of course, he won 16 in my town, actually. A lot of people turned out.
Hip hip hooray for Ashburnham.
That's right. But the fall in 2020, the same people didn't show up. And again, he did not win. But we're going full speed ahead. We have our standouts and had a good reception.
John?
Well, actually, I'm a bit like Dave. Initially, I was a Cruz supporter. And I had misgivings about Trump because I thought he was poorly educated. But I'm a classical philosopher, so that might play a role in that. But having experienced him as president, I think he's the right man for the job. And he's all the better now, all the more the right man for the job, having had that experience.
Ken?
I followed Trump since the late 1960s. And to tell you the truth, I never liked him. I thought he was too flamboyant and too arrogant. And when he announced his presidency, when he came down the golden elevator there, I was actually furious because he was not my first, second, or third choice. But that all turned around with the convention. And first of all, he had his 3 adult children at the convention. And they seemed to be very fine young people. And I said, apples don't fall too far from the tree. So he must be a little bit better than I thought he was. And then Ivanka gave a tremendous speech at the convention, and she said that nobody would work harder for this country than Donald Trump. And that opened me up to listen to him for his acceptance speech at the convention. And after that, I said, I'm all in for Trump, and that's been like that ever since.
Lorraine?
So similar. I thought Trump was in the race to clear the road for Cruz and Kasich, who were the last two standing. So I thought, well, it'd be Cruz or Kasich for me because Trump, he's just going to drop out. And then one day they both left, and it was Trump, and I was like, he wasn't kidding what he was saying. This is truly his words.
Now
So I was all in.
I'm going to throw this out to everyone because I'm sure in all of your circles of family and friends, there are people who don't think like you. How do you deal with them? How do you just avoid the topic? Mary, I'm looking at your eyes getting bigger right there. Do you just avoid the topic of Trump and politics altogether? How do you avoid the elephant, and I'm using that word as a Republican, in the middle of the room?
My view is that everybody's on their own journey. And we're all going to be represented by Trump when he's back in office, and he will be back in office. So even if you're a Biden supporter, Trump is going to represent you.
But
we're all on a journey.
But the Biden supporters can really be nasty.
Yep.
They are not always polite, kind people who believe that we have freedom of speech in this country. Anybody else, how do you deal with it? Do you just ignore it? Do you just avoid those people in your life, or?
Basically, I don't have the patience anymore. I tried to be patient to begin with, but I just don't have the patience anymore. So, and plus, when Trump was elected the first time, many of our Democratic friends who we were social with dropped us immediately. It didn't happen when Obama was elected the second time, but boy, once Trump was, so I don't have the patience for it anymore.
Anyone else?
No, I always try to engage them, really.
I know you do.
He's
and,
great.
and we've been in standouts together where you have a printout that you like to go to people and say, you know, I'd like you to read this. You're not trying to push anything down anybody's throat. You just like them to be open to it, but you get a lot of blowback on that.
But we have to get them to see it for themselves, that they won't take our word for it. They have to convince themselves.
How do you get them to see it for themselves? How do you get people to see Trump for themselves when we have a mass media out there that has spread nothing but lies, disinformation, prevarications?
Even with the media doing what they do, which is bad, we have the news cycles, which have this Trump trial, which is clearly fraud, a fake trial, and then segue to the Hunter trial, and people see the contrast. The contrast is what is going to wake people up, and there's nothing the media can do about that.
You know, I thought it was interesting. I was very surprised that President Biden was going to would follow through and debate, because he first announced it, and I don't think his team was ready for that announcement, that when he said, I'll debate former President Trump. And then I thought his out was going to be when the 34 felony counts were brought up, that he would say, I'm not going to, debate in public a felon. I thought he was going to use that. And then what happened? His own son is now a convicted felon. So do you think that kind of whitewashed it in some ways?
Yep.
Well, the debate hasn't happened yet. We don't know
I know,
if
we
it
still
will.
got 3 hours to go.
We have 3 hours to go and counting. Is there a silent majority type for either President Biden or former President Trump? Do you think there's a silent majority? Many of you have stood out, done standouts. Many of you have stood out with me. We see many cars go by that people are waving and beeping and tooting and fist bumps and everything else. We see that 1 in 10 car goes by that, isn't so nice and, uses some hand gestures towards us.
Yeah.
But the majority of cars that go by do nothing. We might as well be blades of grass standing there with our Trump signs.
So we've been doing Wayland, the liberal town of Wayland, which has all the liberal towns around it. And I would say 50% of the cars ignore us. You were that one. And 80% of the remaining were thumbs up, honk their horns, and are for us. So I think a year ago it would have been the other way around. And now I think most people are awakening.
Do you think there's a silent majority?
So out here, we have half of them are just tuned out, whatever they're doing. And I'd say 90% are for Trump. And it's all ages.
Yeah.
Young, old, every color, every type.
Yeah.
They're all in. It's really something.
We're seeing a lot of support coming from, I don't want to stereotype, but people in pickup trucks,
Oh.
which I'm assuming, and oftentimes they have panel vans with the names of a business on the side, and you can see that they're the real, like, you know, heart of this country. They're the sort of meat and potatoes of this nation that's keeping our nation and the mechanisms behind
Small
our
business.
nation moving.
Right, small private business.
Yeah.
I was up at the Arcadia National Park this last week, hiking around on some of the trails, and I purposely wore my mega hat. And I had no negative comments, and I had a half a dozen or maybe more comments that were positive, and what impressed me, they were all groups of young women.
Oh, wow.
They said, "We like your hat." And so that struck up a conversation, and that was encouraging.
You know, that's a very interesting statistic, because I have heard, and of course polls keep changing and, you know, by the minute, but one of the things that I have heard is that young men are turning to support Trump in droves. That's a demographic he seems to be moving towards him. But young women is a demographic that he's not moving towards him. So that's a very interesting tidbit that you just put out. I hope that's true, not just, you know, in the mountains of Maine, but I hope it's true, you know, all over the country. The 34 convictions, how do you think people are looking at that? Now, Dave, you just said that it's fraudulent at its base.
Yeah.
How do you think people are looking at that? Do you think that's just a crutch now for strong convicted, for strong Democrats with convictions against Trump, that they can use that?
And the drive-by people that are like opposing us at the standouts, that's what they yell out the window. Oh, he's a felon.
Yeah.
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 And all you can say back is, well, yeah, but it's going to be a mistrial. Or, you know, lots of things you can retort to it, or just ignore them.
His son is too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Biden's son is too.
And Biden himself should be.
Yeah, well, we know that.
Yes.
Yes, he's
Yes.
the one that should be.
Yes. Anybody else
Convicted.
have a thought about the 34 convictions and how that's playing into the Democrat
You know,
playbook?
I'm no Taylor Swift fan, but haters gonna hate.
Yeah.
They just will grasp onto anything, even if it's illogical, and just hide behind it. And they're gonna have a hard wake up on November 5th or whenever we find out. They're just gonna have a hard time. I wish they would just broaden their minds a little bit.
I think Lorraine has hit on something that's significant about the opposition to Trump, and that is that it's driven to a huge extent, not by reasoning, but by emotion.
Yep.
There is a huge block of people out there who really don't reason about issues as we do. That the facts, the experience, even the experiences they've gone through, they've lived through, are relevant to them. They have a need a fix about how things are, and this is based on emotional issues. And they are impervious. This type of person tends to be impervious to the actual facts and the history. So you're not going to change their minds.
Well, and John, that kind of comment goes right to my next question, which is going to be, have you ever stopped and asked a Biden supporter, a President Biden supporter, who yells out at you, I don't like Trump because he's a misogynist, he's a racist, he's a bigot, he's a homophobe. I mean, they'll give you every word. Have you ever said to them, really? Give me one example.
Well, my sister, who is very Democrat, I asked her, I said, oh, we had 4 years of peace and prosperity. Wasn't that okay with you? And she goes, no, we didn't. So
Right.
it's like.
That's exactly what I mean.
Emotion.
They are
Yeah.
impervious to
Yeah.
their experience, even when it's their own experience. They lived through the
Yeah.
time. I mean, anyone who's honest has to admit that economically we were all better off when Trump was president.
We were in no wars.
We were in
No
no
wars.
wars. We were respected,
Low unemployment.
low unemployment.
Yeah.
And not only low unemployment, because you could argue we have that now, but the jobs were well-paying
Right.
jobs. They
Full-time.
weren't service industry jobs where people went from Burger King in the morning to McDonald's in the afternoon to cleaning Motel 6 in the evening.
You often heard people complain that Trump has a bull in a china shop approach to foreign policy, for example. As an illustration, when he chewed out our European allies for not spending enough on NATO. But it worked. as Stoltenberg, the head of NATO at the time, said, well, no one else got this done. He's actually pushed these nations to contribute their 2% share, and it's continued since then.
And what
based upon what he
did
said.
that do? Ultimately, that protected we, the people.
Right.
Because otherwise, we were carrying the onus, the burden of millions of dollars, and now we have people buying in with their own responsibility. One of the statistics, again, that I see is that former President Trump seems to be moving the minority needle towards his side. Why do you think that's so? What has he done? What do you think all of a sudden minority groups who were not just Democrat because they liked Biden, but they were Democrats for years, generations, are now all of a sudden moving?
Well, they remember Trump's years with low unemployment in all categories, lowest record lows, and no wars. And now we're looking at Ukraine, we're looking at the Middle East, we're looking possibly, Taiwan, and the contrast, huge contrast now with Biden. So, if they're watching any news, it's plain to see, no matter, even if the media is doing their mainstream media thing.
Also, you mentioned that minorities are coming over to Trump in droves. And one of the reasons for that is the economic pressures affects them more than anybody else in our society. Also, black men can identify with that because they felt the justice system was not fair to them all along, and they're saying they can identify with that. And they realize that these are just bogus charges that Trump has had to react to.
Well, and one of the things that I've oftentimes said to many, many people, and these are not necessarily Trump supporters or Biden supporters, but just to put it out there to all of our viewers, if they can do it to former President Trump, former President of the United States and a billionaire in his own right, they can do it to every one of us. And for years, of course, right to your point, Ken, we saw years of Jim Crow laws or in the South or anywhere where they would pick on one little infraction and they would take it to the limit in the worst possible ways to get the justice that they felt was necessary. And now we're seeing it. We all saw it play out in New York City and in South Carolina to an extent also. Now, there are some, and this baffles me, but there are people who are rational, cogent people, although maybe we could argue that, who will watch President Biden, video clips, speeches, presentations of President Biden, and they will believe that he is mentally and physically fit for the office. How can people with seeing eyes and hearing ears come out with that conclusion?
He was never even a good senator.
No.
Never.
Thank you for that.
I don't think he's a good dad. I don't think he's a good man.
No.
He was a bad VP. He was cheating, going to Ukraine, got his son tucked in there. I
That's
hope
right.
that history
Anyone
comes
actually
out.
who's looked at his history recognizes the man as a liar. He's been a
always
liar
been.
throughout his political career, and he's corrupt.
John, you
And
probably
racist.
remember the fact that he was picked up for, he was challenged for
Plagiarism.
plagiarism.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's a hollow.
But
he's
his
a
whole
hollow.
family is part of a crime machine, essentially.
a cartel.
And anyone who looks at this objectively has to recognize it. And as far as people who claim that he's mentally fit, I don't believe anyone can honestly say that. He's always been a liar, he's always been corrupt, and now he's a senile, corrupt liar.
But he has the mainstream media
Well, that's true.
spewing propaganda, and
Yep.
many people do watch mainstream media. Then a lot of people couldn't care less about politics and just accept what their friends say, their family.
So the latest I understand they're being told through the mainstream media is that different tapes are being sliced and spliced and
Yeah,
diced
cheap fakes.
and putting together. What was that word?
She called it cheap fakes.
Cheap fakes. They're putting together
Yeah.
and they're just saying, oh no, he didn't really fall
Right.
down. He didn't stumble upstairs several times.
He didn't freeze.
But then when they show the real footage, according to them, it's the same thing.
It's the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So
That's true.
what
Go
was
figure.
that old song, Your Lying Eyes?
Lying
Eyes.
Yeah. So if you want to believe that we still need President Biden for 4 more years, if this is your intent upon going to the polls in November and pulling the lever for President Joe Biden, do you think ultimately there's sort of a rationale behind that where they think that it really doesn't matter because Obama is the puppet master? Do you think there are people who look at the failings and the bumblings of Biden and see Obama as the overall magician?
You know, John brought up about people voting with emotion. You would never get a job based on that. It's based on your qualifications, and then you have job performance. And if you're not doing your job, you're out. You're fired. You're fired. I mean, he's got to go. And if Obama's in charge, that cannot be constitutional. What's that about? He's not an elected official. Shouldn't be near the president. It's not right.
Also, the people that are like behind Biden that just can't be argued with any logic. 5%, maybe more, are going to be completely lost. Like, all right, so they're going to go to, I mean, Trump will be the next president. And some people are going to vote for Biden. You can't help it. You just got to ignore them. 5% are going to be lost forever.
I think what Mary said was the main reason why people still support Biden is that all they do is to listen to CNN and NBC and PBS, and they really do not understand what's going on. As John said, they're reacting on emotion and not reason and not a grasp of the facts.
And they've almost shut off their brain to
Absolutely.
reason because they're not open. Well, you know, because you have the fact sheet and you try to engage with people, and they don't want to talk. They just want to shut it off and come back at you and say he's a homophobe, he's a racist, he's a misogynist, I mean, they have that litany down pretty pat.
And this explains why they look at the particular TV shows they look at. I mean, those are the shows like The View and things like that that are giving them this emotional rush, which is what they want. Any assessment of the facts would have to lead you to a different.
We don't want to be oppositional with people. We just have been reading and studying for years, and nothing is adding up with Biden. It's not our fault. We just see the facts and bring it forward. He's no good. So Trump has done a good job.
And we've had instances in our past history where there have been political, even national political leaders who've been behind the scenes, like Mark Hanna in Cleveland behind McKinley, or Boss Tweed and Tammany Hall. I mean, these were figures who were sort of on the fringe and never really in front of the equivalent of TV cameras. But what's different today is that Obama is not just behind the scenes, but he's part of a mindset based in large part upon the educational world they came through, that says that there are fundamental problems with the American constitutional system, and it has to be replaced. This is why Obama had that famous line about we need to fundamentally
Transform.
transform
And
America.
his wife doubled
Right.
down on that and said that's why she was so proud of her husband.
Right, and they
because
never
he was going
really,
to
this is typical, they
fundamentally
never really explained in detail, what does that mean, fundamentally transform? They couldn't explain it in detail because it would have outraged the American public. But their aim is really not to continue American constitutionalism, but to replace it.
Well, a move towards
And
socialism.
replace it with some form of socialism,
Globalism.
globalism.
Yeah. Globalism.
Dave, you made an interesting point in the beginning that I'd like you all to kind of think about and maybe chime in on. You mentioned that it's not so much President Trump or former President Trump, hopefully to be President Trump again. It's a movement. It's
Yes.
the MAGA movement. Could you kind of explain to our viewers what you were thinking about? What does that mean? And I'd like to hear other
What
people's thoughts.
Trump is doing, he's just a titular head, but he's representing MAGA, as he puts it. But what is he's restoring the republic.
Which
we
is-
have not had a republic for a long time. And I would urge people to go to Trump's inauguration speech. He gave a 17-minute speech in January of 2021. And right at the beginning, like about 30 seconds worth, the military were standing behind him when he said, "I am restoring the republic to you, the people." So that says it all. And he's been
Right.
doing it since.
We hear a lot currently from both parties, unfortunately, about how we're a democracy. We're not a democracy. Anyone who knows our history knows that the Founding Fathers debated the issue. They rejected democracy because they were aware of the ancient Greek examples of failed democratic states. We're a constitutional republic. This was an explicit intention, and it came across most vividly in the form of the famous anecdote when Dr. Franklin left the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia the end of summer 1787, and a lady on the street said, "Well, Dr. Franklin, what do we have here? A monarchy, in other words, or something else?" And he said, "A republic, if we can keep it."
Right.
The
So
fact
let
that
me
we're
ask you-
using the language of our opponents and saying this is a democracy really is a slippery slope, because it's not.
We've got just a couple of minutes left, so I want you to put on your sort of look into the future hats. 2 questions. What do you think will happen at the debate tonight? And the second question, who will win the presidential election? Who will be our next president of the United States? Dave?
He's effectively commander-in-chief right now. He'll be president going forward.
do you think the election
and
will
I
be
couldn't care less
stolen?
about tonight's debate. I don't even plan to watch it. Maybe I'll catch clips,
Do you think
highlights.
the election will be stolen?
I don't know what will happen in November, but I don't think, between now and then, there's a lot to happen.
Yeah.
Trump said the other day that the next 5 months are going to be very trying on the United States and on America.
Mary?
I can't speculate about it. I hope for one thing, I hope that Trump is elected, because if he isn't, I think it's the end for this country. It's the end, I really do. I feel that this is the final battle, like he says, this is it.
John?
If the election is held honestly, he will win overwhelmingly. As far as the debate is concerned, I know that CNN controls the mics, so if they want to silence at any moment, they can do that. I think in a way, it's irrelevant.
Ken?
Well, with the debate, there are so many variables involved that we can't predict what's going to happen. I mean, Biden could look good. He's been a week in preparing, having 2 rehearsals per day. In a fair election, Trump wins hands down, but we know it's going to be a challenge because it's not going to be a fair election. It has to be too big to rig. And those aren't just words.
Lorraine.
That's reality.
When he says swamp the vote, he's not kidding. Everybody get out and vote. Get out and vote. Just vote. Don't stay home and say, oh, he's going to make it. You don't know what kind of games are going to happen in November.
Thank you. All of our, yes.
One final thing. Trump, in January of 2021, Trump and his whole family were blaring out, "The best is yet to come." That phrase has been said many times since. So that's what I'm looking forward to come next year.
Because with Trump,
The
promises
best is yet to
made,
come.
promises kept. Always.
Thank you very much, all of you,
Thank you.
for being with us tonight. And I think it probably did go much faster than you thought it was going to do. Would you like to do it again, maybe
Sure.
closer to the election, and we could
Absolutely.
reconvene and talk about more of what we're looking for? Also, viewers, down below our screen, we have had the Trump, Massachusetts Trump website. It's right there, mass4trump2024.com. There's opportunities to get to know more about the campaign and President Trump. So we thank you for watching Your Right to Know and sitting in here tonight with the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. We want you to remember that your local city or town Republican committee is the only grassroots organization that holds dear your liberty, your constitutional rights, and conservative values. We'd like you to join us anytime for one of our monthly meetings. Why do we feel that you should consider being a Republican? Is because to us, the GOP stands for growth, opportunity, and prosperity for all people, and we always stand for freedom. Thank you and good night.